Mosaic, a daily news program from Link TV, presents a selection of news reports from independent and state-controlled broadcasters from throughout the Middle East.
Welcome. U.S. Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld said that the Pentagon announced that 85,000 American soldiers will be deployed early next year to serve in Iraq and support forces who are currently there. Rumsfeld added in a press conference at the Department of Defense that about 47,000 reservist soldiers and National Guardsmen will be told to prepare for service in Iraq and Afghanistan. The Pentagon plans to return the Marines to Iraq and reduce number of U.S. forces there. In Iraq, 2 U.S. soldiers were killed and a third was wounded in 2 separate incidents. U.S. forces were attacked in 2 separate operations in the city of Mosul in northern Iraq. At least 3 Iraqis were killed and a group of U.S. soldiers were wounded. The United States Army said they arrested 2 officers who were vice admirals in the former Iraqi army during raid campaigns in the area of Baquba. A spokesman for the United States Army said that one of the officers is behind the recent attacks against U.S. forces in the area. This afternoon, the police stopped the candidate running for the presidential elections tomorrow, Mohammed Khana Walid Haidallah. The election campaign ended in Mauritania amid tension after his campaign manager, Muawiyah Walid Taya, accused the opposition candidate, Walid Haidallah, of threatening to overthrow the government by force. Walid Haidallah was arrested in a riot campaign that lasted 3 days, during which his house was searched and 2 of his sons were arrested. Haidallah clarified that the government is threatened by the fact that he is running against Walid Taya, indicating that they were going to rig the presidential elections, which are taking place 5 months after the Mauritanian forces put down a coup led by the opposition leader. Israel's Channel 10 broadcasted the launch of a long-range artillery shell conducted by the aircraft manufacturing industry in Israel. The launch was mistakenly broadcasted, raising concern within the Israeli political circles. The Israeli parliament commented, saying it is a dangerous oversight that should not have happened. However, a committee will be formed to investigate the incident, especially amid international calls to expose the Iranian and North Korean nuclear programs, preceded by a war against Iraq to find weapons of mass destruction.
One of them is recording the experiment. The other is saying, please stop the broadcast. But it was too late. A small part of Israel's weapons program was revealed, which Israel still keeps secret and denies its existence. During the main evening news on Israel's Channel 10, an adulterated copy was aired of a secret experiment on the launching of a long-range artillery shell, which was captured by mistake.
وفي أنحاء الشرق الأوسط كان باستطاعة كل البلدان التي تعتبرها إسرائيل خطراً.
All over the Middle East and in the countries which Israel perceives as a threat, people may have been watching a weapons experiment designed to hit targets 50 kilometers away. The television station captured a live unencrypted broadcast sent from one observation control room to another monitoring the weapons experiment. The footage was captured during a routine scan of the Israeli satellite Amos. The station's technicians only used a standard household satellite dish to capture the footage.
من النوع الذي يستخدمه مشتركو قنوات الكيبل في المنازل وهذا الأمر يعني أن منطقة
The areas between Iran and Libya are covered by the Amos satellite. Thus, they may have seen the entire experiment during this live broadcast, and not just an altered copy. The footage aired by the Israeli station shows the technicians monitoring their data-filled computer screens, while 2 Israeli generals watched the launch. One of them is the deputy chief commander.
As part of a series of reports on Ramadan, we went to the United States, where every year the White House invites members from the Arab and Muslim communities to an iftar dinner. Muslim and American reactions to this event vary.
The Muslim community in Washington is celebrating the holy month of Ramadan amid pressing issues due to new developments in the Islamic world, including the Middle East. These events have a strong impact on the U.S. Capitol, thus affecting the Muslim community and their activities. Unlike 2 decades ago, Ramadan does not go unnoticed anymore. Ordinary Americans, including the highest authorities in the country, are now interested in this holy month. President Bush held an iftar dinner on the first day of the holy month, hosting a number of Muslim leaders in America. The president reiterated that America rejects all forms of ethnic and religious bigotry, addressing members of the Muslim community in the United States.
America rejects all forms of
ethnic and religious bigotry. We welcome the values of every responsible citizen, no matter where they were born.
Nevertheless, several leaders of Islamic organizations in the United States had a different opinion. They welcomed the president's initiative to host an iftar dinner in the White House, asserting that they were not going to boycott the event. Other Muslim leaders talked about double standards of the U.S. policies, referring to President Bush's criticism of former Malaysian Prime Minister Mahathir Mohamad for his remarks on the Jewish influence throughout the world. Meanwhile, he did not reprimand U.S. General Boykin for his anti-Islamic remarks. These community leaders say that the iftar dinner is a positive start. However, it is not a serious step towards improving the situation of Muslims in America.
I think that the iftar is aimed
I think that the iftar is aimed much more at the general public in the U.S. to make assurances that we are not at war with Islam.
Some Muslim leaders emphasize that the Bush administration must do more than meet with Muslims during special occasions, encouraging the Muslim community to stop isolating themselves and to play a larger role in politics.
Our concern is that the
administration invites Muslims for dinner, but not to discussions. They don't invite us to briefings about the policies of the government, but they invite us for biryani.
Israeli Prime Minister Ariel Sharon's office announced that the prisoner swap exchange deal with Hezbollah would be put before the Israeli weekly cabinet meeting on Sunday, following lengthy German-led mediation efforts between the two sides. Israeli daily Yediot Ahronot quoted Sharon Thursday as saying he favored the prisoner swap with Hezbollah because failure to push through with a deal could lead to the death of an Israeli held by Hezbollah.
Negotiations on the prisoner swap deal between Hezbollah and the Israeli government reached a decisive point with Wednesday's announcement by Israeli Prime Minister Ariel Sharon that his cabinet will vote Sunday on the prisoner swap.
In the last few days, it was positive progress, and the Prime Minister decided to bring it to a vote in the next meeting of the cabinet on this coming Sunday. I believe that all the details will be given to the ministers, and everyone will have to decide how is going to vote. It's not so easy. Any kind of decision, I think, will be criticized here in the Israeli public opinion.
In the framework of his efforts to pass the swap deal Sunday, Sharon charged the head of the negotiations personnel, Ilan Biran, to hold talks with a number of his ministers to update them on the latest developments and to convince them to vote for the swap.
We can prevent the deal from taking place now, but then we will not have information about Arad, and we will not restore the kidnapped soldiers and Tenenbaum. They will then disappear in the same way Arad disappeared in. That's why I will vote for the deal.
I had a look at the givens and I'm likely to vote against the deal. We must understand that the talk is not on the prisoner swap deal, but on other kinds of operations of blackmailing and forcing the state of Israel to kneel down, to shake all the Israeli security institutions. As Hezbollah is the leader of the terrorist organizations in the world, these organizations will follow in its heels.
Israeli television reported that Sharon's decision comes as the German mediators issued a threat calling on the Israelis to hand in a ratified official form on the deal, as negotiations could not continue under the current conditions.
A German warning led to Sharon's decision. The Germans submitted a letter to Sharon saying, present as soon as possible a form ratified from your cabinet, even if it was not the final form. The Germans are saying they can't proceed in the negotiations as long as the Israeli position is open and conditioned by the cabinet ratification.
Israeli sources stressed that the form to be voted on Sunday will be the general broad lines of the exchange and not the minute details that need further discussions. However, the Israeli television hinted that Hezbollah Secretary General Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah set the end of the month of Ramadan as a deadline for the deal to take place.
Nasrallah is threatening that negotiations will be settled if they are not settled now. He wants to stand on the last Friday of the month of Ramadan, the day he and the Iranians called Jerusalem International Day, and have obeyed Dirani and the others by his side. Then he would appear as the liberator and savior.
Israeli television said 430 Arab prisoners will be included in the swap operation, including Palestinian and Syrian detainees, and the 19 Lebanese detainees. Among them are Sheikh Abdel Karim Abed and Haj Mustafa Dirani, in exchange for the 3 Israeli captives and Colonel Al-Hanan Tenenbaum held by Hezbollah. As for the Jordanian prisoners, the Israeli television reported that it was agreed that they would be set free in the coming few days so that they would not be released in the framework of the prisoner swap with Hezbollah. As soon as the news on Sunday's vote was made public, the families of the Israeli captives said they would exert every possible effort to let the draft be passed and to avoid what they called losing this opportunity.
Tension was mounting in Saudi Arabia, where the hunt for suspected militants took a dramatic turn. Saudi security sources said 2 militants blew themselves up Thursday as security forces hunted for what they call terrorists in the holy city of Mecca. The Saudi Interior Ministry earlier said that Saudi security forces shot dead 1 person during a shootout with militants in Riyadh early Thursday, which left 8 policemen slightly wounded. The incident happened in the Al Suwaidi residential district in the southern sector of the Saudi capital. Earlier this week, Saudi authorities alleged they had foiled a plot hatched by fighters of the Al-Qaeda network to kill pilgrims who throng the holy city of Mecca during the current Muslim fasting month of Ramadan. According to reports, Iraqis and Americans secretly tried last February to avoid war against Iraq through negotiations mediated by a Lebanese businessman. However, US President George W. Bush and his administration seem to have taken the decision to go to war against Iraq no matter what diplomatic progress was achieved.
The American people can take comfort in knowing that their country has done everything humanly possible to avoid war and to secure Iraq's peaceful disarmament.
Just days before US-led forces invaded their country, Iraqi officials made a last-ditch effort to avert the war, but US officials rebuffed the overture. According to ABC and the New York Times reports published Wednesday, an influential advisor to the Pentagon received a secret message from a Lebanese-American businessman indicating that Saddam Hussein wanted to make a deal. Imad Haj said he was secretly approached by an Iraqi intelligence official about 6 weeks before the US-led forces attacked Iraq. According to the news report, Haj went to Baghdad in mid-February to meet with Saddam Hussein's intelligence chief, General Tahir Habbush, who was later labeled by the US as the Jack of Diamonds in the Iraqi regime cards.
Based on my meeting with this man and what I was told by him and his associates, I think an effort was there to avert the war.
And they were trying desperately
to get the message across that they want to cut a deal.
According to the New York Times, the chief of the Iraqi intelligence service and other Iraqi officials had told Hajj that they wanted Washington to know that Iraq no longer had weapons of mass destruction and offered to let American troops and experts do an independent search.
And he said if it makes the U.S. feel more comfortable about it, they could send 1,000, 2,000 agents, scientists to come and check for weapons of mass destruction.
Reports said the Iraqi officials also offered to hand over a man, Abdurrahman Yassin, who was suspected of involvement in what they call terrorist activities. Hajj told ABC News that Bush said Yassin was worth $25 million, but the Iraqi officials wanted to show good faith and let the U.S. take him. In early March, Richard Perle, an advisor to the top Pentagon officials, reportedly met in London with Imad Hajj. Hajj laid out the Iraqis' position and pressed the Iraqi request for a direct meeting with Perle or other U.S. representatives.
Called his office at Chevy Chase, and he'd indicated that the consensus, it was a no-go.
A no-go.
Right. It seemed to me there was a genuine offer. It was on the table, and somebody should have talked, at least talked.
Democratic lawmakers Henry Waxman and John Dingell said that the U.S. Army may replace Halliburton as the agent for future gasoline imports into Iraq following accusations of overcharging. They said they were surprised no one had checked with the Defense Energy Support Center earlier. They have accused the Halliburton of charging the U.S. government $162.5 million for 61.3 million gallons of gasoline imported from Kuwait, equivalent to $2.65 a gallon. They said officials had told them the Defense Energy Support Center was already importing some gasoline into Iraq for military use for less than half the amount. Iranian National Security Council Chief Hassan Rouhani is to meet the head of the UN nuclear agency on Saturday in Vienna, just days before the watchdog publishes a crucial report on Tehran's nuclear program. Iran's ambassador to the IAEA, Ali Akbar Salehi, said Tehran has given the UN nuclear watchdog drawings of the components used to make centrifuges. He said this was part of Iran's continuing cooperation with the International Atomic Energy Agency to disprove allegations it is trying to secretly develop nuclear weapons. Salehi said Iran had recently revealed to the inspectors the components and the original drawings for these components. Salehi said Iran would honor its promise to agree to sign an additional protocol to the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty to allow wider unannounced IAEA inspections. The European Union told Turkey on Wednesday it should do more to help end the division of Cyprus if it wants to join the bloc. The bluntest warning the EU has given yet to Ankara. This report has more.
The European Union's head office told the 10 relatively poor countries set to join next spring to move faster in getting ready by enacting required reforms in areas ranging from food safety to garbage collection. The European Commission dispatched Turkey by saying that failure to settle the Cyprus issue could pose a serious obstacle to Turkey's bid to open EU membership talks, rebuffing last-minute pressure from Ankara.
In our strategy paper, we did make a link between the Turkish request to accede and the question of Cyprus. I perhaps have to explain that because of any reaction in Turkey to be misunderstood. This is not a pre-request as far as the conclusions of Helsinki, where it said expressly that this is not a condition. This is simply noting a fact. We simply note that if there is not a solution to the Cyprus question, then this would be a considerable obstacle to Turkey's aspiration to Europe. That's all we are saying.
However, in its report, the European Commission praised Ankara for the far-reaching changes to the political and legal system enacted so far, while noting laws still needed to be put into practice in many areas. It said more progress was needed in areas such as human rights and civilian control of the military before December 2004, when EU leaders are to decide whether to open entry negotiations with Turkey. Turkish Foreign Minister Abdullah Gül vowed to step up efforts to end the decades-old division of the island, which joins the EU next May, but added that Cyprus should not be used to delay the opening of negotiations with this country. Late on Tuesday, Gül rang the Enlargement Commissioner Günter Verheugen to urge the EU executive not to link its candidacy and the Cyprus problem in the progress report. Gül said Turkey, the only country to recognize Rauf Denktaş's breakaway Turkish Cypriot enclave, wanted a deal. The European Union gave Poland, the largest of the new entrants, the worst report card, citing its serious concern in 9 areas. Poland, along with Hungary, Lithuania, Estonia, Latvia, Slovakia, Slovenia, Cyprus, Malta and the Czech Republic, wrapped up entry talks last December and have all ratified their entry into the 15-nation club, sealing the Union's largest ever expansion set for May the 1st. But the annual readiness reports showed all still had a way to go in conforming to 80,000 pages of EU law and regulations.
The police investigated with Prime Minister Ariel Sharon about allegations of bribery violating elections regulations. Investigators questioned Sharon at the Prime Minister's headquarters in the capital, Jerusalem. We learned that Sharon cooperated with the investigators. This report prepared by Mikhail Dana. Prime Minister Ariel Sharon spent most of the day in his private home in Hafat HaShikanim preparing for the investigation. The Prime Minister reviewed many documents and consulted with his lawyer and 2 sons so that he would be able to recall the events as much as possible. In the morning, a team of investigators from 2 police departments arrived to the Prime Minister's headquarters in Jerusalem. Ariel Sharon had to answer questions concerning 2 cases. The first allegation was about taking a bribe from a businessman named David Apple. Mr. Apple offered Sharon's son, Gilad, a consultant job in the late 90s in return for a generous salary reaching hundreds of thousands of dollars. There are rumors that in return Sharon made accommodations for a project financed by David Apple and called the Greek island. The second case was also about taking a bribe through his 2 sons from a foreign businessman, Cyril Kiran, as donations for the 1999 election campaigns. Prime Minister Sharon was cooperative when investigators presented him with a lot of documents and evidence. The Prime Minister cancelled most of his commitments and scheduled meetings to make himself available for this investigation.
The U.S. announced the end of military operations in Afghanistan, but the state of affairs in the country remains mysterious. Since the beginning of this year, the situation has been unstable as U.S. forces face violent attacks and increasing human losses. As the Afghani army expanded their military operations against the Taliban movement, the security situation deteriorated. Taliban members have been able to expand their influence in areas that are not under the government control.
The U.S. war against terrorism in Afghanistan is not over yet. Contrary to what the media has been saying, the situation on the ground in Afghanistan is actually getting worse. In western Afghanistan, the U.S. forces have been subjected to waves of violent attacks, leading to an increase in the number of American casualties and the deterioration of the security situation in the country. In the meantime, the Afghani army has been expanding its military operations against the Taliban, who have managed to regroup themselves in areas outside of the government jurisdiction, marking a new era of guerrilla warfare. Despite consecutive U.S. military operations in eastern Afghanistan, Taliban fighters have managed to launch painful attacks against the U.S. forces. U.S. military spokesman General Rodney Davis announced that 4 American soldiers were injured recently in clashes with Taliban fighters in the Baketa state, northeastern of Afghanistan. General Davis told journalists that individuals suspected of belonging to the Taliban attacked U.S. military units near Organ military base by RPG missiles. 4 American soldiers were injured during the clashes, which lasted for 1 hour. Meanwhile, in the Afghani capital of Kabul, an explosion took place in front of the Afghani Trade Ministry, located near the office of a humanitarian organization. There were no reports of casualties. A spokesman for the peacekeeping forces led by NATO said that a Canadian unit was in the area when the explosion detonated. Furthermore, an unidentified person assassinated military leader Shireen Aga Sandni when he left his home in Khair Khan al-Chaabi neighborhood in northern Kabul. The assassin used a silent weapon to shoot the victim 5 times.
A Pakistani military spokesman said that his country has started to secure its borders with Afghanistan by constructing a separating wall and checkpoints to prevent Taliban and Al-Qaeda members from infiltrating into the country. Pakistan, the refuge of Islamic organizations and their madrasas, decided to close its doors to infiltrators who were used to entering the country secretly. It no longer wants to shelter Al-Qaeda and Taliban members. Yesterday's friends are the enemies of the future because now they are considered a burden and an embarrassment to its close ally, Washington, which never stopped asking Islamabad for more accommodations or compromises. The western borders with Afghanistan, now closed, are called the Friendship Doors. They extend 750 kilometers northwest of the capital of Islamabad in Shaman city. Along the borders, Pakistani soldiers equipped with weapons and ammunition were stationed behind dividing walls and checkpoints.
We are quite sure that the border has been effectively sealed.
We are quite sure that the border has been effectively sealed and that the group stopped their illegal movement. Only individuals and small groups can now move through the borders.
This Pakistani decision to close the friendship doors generated nothing but resentment in the neighboring country, Afghanistan.
What kind of friendship is this? Yes, we have 2 different flags on the 2 sides of the borders, but they dug trenches. I do not understand what kind of friendship they want.
The Pakistani government now denies that it shelters Al-Qaeda and Taliban members, forgetting or maybe ignoring that its border area is the home of conservative tribesmen and groups who have similar philosophies, visions, and goals to those of Al-Qaeda and Taliban. Will Pakistan later build another separating wall inside the Pakistani national territories to accommodate foreign demands? إليسار أراني العربية.
Mosaic is made possible by a grant from the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation, which promotes journalism excellence worldwide and invests in the vitality of 26 U.S. communities, and the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation. Additional support is provided by the Firedoll Foundation and Henry and Virgilia Dakin.